Good morning, students. In the course of History of England, today we are going to discuss the fourth lecture, which is devoted to the Vikings attacks to the British Isles. Today we have three plans: the Vikings attacks to the British Isles, after the great struggle against the enemies, and we will tell some words about triumph of the Danes. So probably you must have heard about Vikings because there were so many films devoted to Vikings attacks to some territories of European countries and other parts of the world. And Vikings are one of the most popular tribes in the world, in the history of the world, which conquered many territories throughout their existence. And with the end of the first millennium, Vikings reached North America 500 years before Columbus, pay attention. Viking raids eventually led to trade and colonization. The Viking period describes a whole new age in Europe between about the mid-700 to 1150 AD. Vikings were very skillful people. They were very good navigators. They were very good warriors. Yes, some people, some historians claim that Vikings were wild and illiterate people. Maybe that is true, but we should mention that they were courageous people. They were not coward. They were courageous people who wanted to invade new and new territories. And Viking means some people who lived near the sea, warrior of the seas, and in some cases it means some pirates. And Vikings, why did Vikings start invading other places, other European countries, including the British Isles? Of course, they wanted to widen their territory. Firstly, they wanted to occupy new territories in order to boost their existence, first of all. And they were so skillful that they could manage to invade any territory which was which could seem challenging for them. And Vikings were from Scandinavian peninsula. At the present time, Denmark, Sweden, and Norway are located in Scandinavian peninsula, and they started the invasion coming from that territory. From northern part of Europe, they spread their invasion throughout European countries. Viking warriors, as I mentioned to you before, they were courageous people, they were not afraid of anything, and even they frightened enemies themselves. And their arms were modern for that time, and they were really skillful and, if we can say, bloody warriors, because they did not have any mirrors when they faced the enemies. And they had their iron helmets, as you can see in our slides. They had special nose guard, and they had chain mail to protect them, and they had their own shield. For weapons, they had an axe and a sword. So, as you see, they were armed to the teeth before starting their invasion, and their looking was also frightening, as some historians describe their invasions. And they had their army, which was quite strong again, and all those people obeyed to their commander, and there was friendly atmosphere among their army. But there was no way, there was no any mercy towards the person who betrayed their army, their state as well. And Vikings started invading the British Isles as they understood that the land of the British Isles soil was very fruitful and they could earn enough money, enough gold, enough silver if they invaded, if they conquered that territory. And they traveled by longboats to new territories, and turn by turn they reached their aims, by the way. And one thing can be mentioned that they burned constructions on their way. They burned churches, monasteries, buildings of people, houses of people, public like constructions. Nothing was left when Vikings started their invading. So that was their way of invading students. That's why we cannot say anything towards their fierce invasion. And later, Vikings were named as Danes, and because they were mostly from Denmark, but we should not forget that some of them were from modern Norway and Sweden. It was one big Scandinavian peninsula. There was no any independent country as we have today. Students, we mentioned about arms and weapons of Vikings. Here we should also tell some words about Viking ship. It was named as Olsberg, and we can say that Olsberg was one of the best, if not best, one of the best ships in the world at the time. We can say that Vikings were lions of the seas, lions of water. They were powerful on sea. That's why when Vikings were approaching to one new territory, local people ran away because they understood it was very hard to struggle against such powerful enemy. And the well-preserved Norwegian Olsberg ship was found in a burial mound, which also contained two female skeletons and grave goods. So Olsberg ship was found, it was real Olsberg ship, was found from the depths of sea. It was put in the museums, and people can enjoy how beautiful, how powerful the Olsberg ship was. Some words about technical features of Olsberg. It was very mobile, so it could easily land on the shore, and so people who were on these ships, they could have easy maneuvers when they were sailing on the boat. It was 21 meters long, and 35 men, soldiers, could be settled on that ship. So Olsberg was not only a ship to carry some weapons, but soldiers, seamen, pirates, and warriors or Vikings could themselves stay on the ship, and they could attack the enemies even being staying on that ship. And some words about Vikings' attacks to the British Isles, as you see, from the Scandinavian peninsula, from Denmark, Norway, Sweden, crossing the North Sea, and the whole British Isles kingdoms were attacked by Vikings. Turn by turn, Anglo-Saxon kingdoms anyway was facing the strongest enemy. The first kingdom of Anglo-Saxons which was attacked was Northumbria. One of Northumbrian writers described it as the morning when Vikings came with their greatest invasion to the territory or to the city where that writer was living. He said, I woke up in the morning and saw the city was, the town was filled with smoke of fire. I felt I was in hell. And Vikings seemed to be dragons, like they seemed to fly and attack, grasp people and attack and kill easily. So, the Northumbrian writer described those Viking soldiers as very strong and powerful people who could eliminate anyone on their way. So, students, we can say that some countries, some kingdoms of Anglo-Saxons anyway somehow tried to stop Vikings, but it was very difficult. And the country, the Anglo-Saxon kingdoms, we can say they were divided into, like the whole British Isles was divided into two parts. Eastern and northern part belonged to the Danes, to the people, to the Vikings who came from Scandinavia, and some parts, half of the country belonged to local, like British people, to Anglo-Saxons. And the territory where Danish people, I mean, at the time they were named as Danes, they settled down, they started living there. It was named as Danelaw. Even London was included in the part where Danelaw was followed. So it was a hard time for the British Isles because people were killed, the buildings were destroyed. The country was divided into like two big parts, and local people had to pay more taxes than before. It was a hard time, it was a difficult time, but anyway, the enemy was enough strong to set these new conditions and rules for local people. And when we are speaking about Vikings, about Danes, we can say that by different names, by Danish rulers, by names of Danes, they stayed up to the start of the Middle Ages in the British Isles as well. And again, in this map, you can clearly see that the whole British Isles was divided into two big parts. And a question arises, why couldn't Anglo-Saxon kingdoms stop the enemy? First of all, Vikings were stronger, as they had like own powerful ships, which eased their invasion on the British Isles. They had better arms, weapons than local, like Anglo-Saxons. But the key moment here is that there was no friendship, there was no unity among Anglo-Saxon kingdoms. They did not they did not get united into one strong country. That caused their deaths. That caused deaths, tragical deaths of the whole state, we can say. And when we are speaking about Vikings, we cannot go without mentioning Alfred the Great, students. So he was the person who started struggling against the Vikings. He was the person who established, founded the first English navy. He was a person who was managing, he managed to make a treaty with the Vikings. He was able to drive the enemies away somehow. It was difficult, but he managed to do that. The only king in the history of England who was given the title Great, it was Alfred. So he was a good warrior, he was a good ruler, but also he paid great attention to the culture, to the development of culture, to the education. He established new schools in England, in the British Isles. He was king of Wessex, and he asked his courtiers to agitate education. He wanted every citizen of his country to be educated. He enlightened people. His aim was to spread wisdom, knowledge among people. And he was the first person who started translation of the Bible into English, into Old English. And it also gave chance to local, to ordinary people to read, to get acknowledged with what the Bible was. And of course, he started translating the famous book Ecclesiastical instead of the English people. And after his death, this book was continued as well. And he also was patron of Anglo-Saxon Chronicle. And after his death, Anglo-Saxon Chronicle was also continued being written by other people. And as I told you, he promoted education, he supported culture and art, he translated Latin books into Old English. He wanted his people to get known about those new things, new novels for that time. So King Alfred the Great was able to make a more powerful ship, even more powerful ship than Augsburg. He asked his builders to build such a ship which could win, which could defeat the Vikings' Augsburg ship. When it was done, it was easy to fight against the enemy. King Alfred the Great was so absorbed in the idea how to stop, how to defeat Vikings, that he was every time thinking of different tactics of war. And there is one interesting story related to King Alfred the Great. One day he was dressed as an ordinary person and was walking through the streets of London. And when one woman asked him to look after her cakes when she was going to the hill to return cows. And King Alfred the Great was so absorbed into wars, tactics, Vikings attacks that he forgot to look after those cakes, and cakes burned. When the woman came back, she started yelling at King Alfred the Great, not knowing that he was a king. And she took a broom and hit King and drove him away. So it proves how King Alfred the Great was devoted completely to the achieving of his goals. And he achieved his goal. He made England independent. Not complete independence was reached, but anyway, he was able to reach his aim partly. The saddest thing about any man is that he be ignorant, and the most exciting thing is that he knows. It was said by Alfred the Great. You see, we shouldn't be ignorant. We should pay attention to everything what is happening around us. We are responsible for events which are happening in our country as well. And we are part of these changes. That's why Alfred the Great at that time said that knowing everything, participating in those events is a good thing for any person. I'm a part of all whom I have met. It is another saying said by King Alfred the Great. As you see, he liked his nation. He was devoted to his nation. And anytime when he was speaking about his people, his nation, he said that he was part of them. He said that he was responsible for his actions, for his deeds, for the sake of his nation. Students, I will recommend you to get some more information about Vikings invasion, about Vikings attacks to the British Isles. You can find out some more interesting facts, and I will advise you to see a 3D format museum from a British museum site where you can see real Uzbek ship which was taken from the depths of sea. That's all for today. Thank you.